You're not the smartest person in the room. I think
that's very hard for technical founders.
they may be very good on the technical side, but maybe in terms of understanding the market, what does it take to go to market? Or we talked about what does it take to attract talent, or how do you build a company? So to be a successful founder, they need to just understand that there are many elements that they cannot be expert in every single dimension. And they therefore need to be open to learning. Stéphane Bancel of Moderna, at the time that he had the idea for the vaccine back in 2020, it was in Davos, he got the original idea. And he had a conversation with his head of manufacturing when he said, how can I support you to make 1 billion doses of the vaccine? On the one hand, he was clearly setting an audacious goal, which I'm sure some of these founders do with their team. And at the same time, coming in with the spirit of, how can I support you? So Stéphane, was always willing to roll up his sleeves, solve a problem together with his team, and just acknowledge that they may not have answers to all the problems, and bring all the best ideas to then together solve tough problems. And that's what then helped him launch the vaccine. And then, as they say, rest is history.
I'm joined today by Ramesh Srinivasan. Ramesh is a senior partner at McKinsey and a trusted advisor to some of the world's top CEOs. He's also a close friend and one of the most thoughtful people I know. Ramesh just published a book called The Journey of Leadership. It's full of lessons from thousands of hours spent with leaders at companies like Cognizant, Moderna, Nissan, and Delta. Together, we explore 3 broad topics. First, how founders can discover their natural leadership style. Second, why empathy is a core leadership skill. And perhaps most importantly, what it really takes to build high-performing teams and inspire people at scale. Here's Ramesh.
Thank you for joining me today in the podcast. It's really fun to see you again after so many years.
Thank you for having me.
Well, why don't you tell our audience a little bit about yourself?
So I'm Ramesh Srinivasan. I'm a senior partner with McKinsey. I actually grew up, as you know, in India.
Yep.
And joined McKinsey in India, spent the first 10 years with McKinsey in India, and moved to the US about 20 years ago. The sector that I know well is healthcare. And I'm also a student of leadership. I'm the dean of our Bauer Forum, which is McKinsey's CEO leadership program. We've had 600 CEOs who have gone through the program. And based on the learnings of these leaders, but also our broader work on leadership, we've just published a book called The Journey of Leadership, which I'm sure we'll talk about. And my wife and I were very passionate about social impacts, especially education in India, and I serve on a number of nonprofit boards in India.
Well, thank you. So let's talk through all of those aspects of your life, but maybe just start a little bit with your personal story growing up and what led you to do the things you've done. And then we can build on that to talking a little bit more about the book.
Yeah, I grew up, I was actually born in Delhi. And I know you.
I was born in Delhi too, yes.
We share that. And my dad was in the defense in India. And we moved to the south. So I spent most of my time growing up in Chennai, in the south of India. Unfortunately, my father passed away when I was 12 years old. And so
there you go.
And that really forced me to become much more independent. And it also taught me, I always had a need for being liked by people, which...
that hasn't changed.
That hasn't changed. And it can be a strength, but it can also be something you have to be conscious about. I realized leadership is not a popularity contest, and being an advisor and coach and mentor, which I enjoy doing, and I have as a profession, sometimes I have to share a tough message with people. So it's been a journey. You've seen me in that journey as well. I work together.
And I was the other extreme of that, like, and being very comfortable with being disliked. And so definitely a journey for both of us. But why don't we just start with the book? Tell me a little bit more about the book and what inspired it.
Yeah, so this idea of writing the book came about a little over 3 years ago when my co-dean of the Bauer Forum, Hans Werner Kass, and myself, we just had a very successful Bauer Forum. About 10 CEOs had gone through the program, and we were having lunch on a Saturday after the Bauer Forum, and we were really inspired by the journey of these 10 leaders. And we knew we were getting to a scale where we were going to cross 500 CEOs. So we knew we had that trajectory. And we thought, how cool would it be to bring the lessons and insights from these journeys of these 500 leaders to the world?
So what are some of the lessons that, for someone who hasn't read the book yet, and what are 2 or 3 things that you would have them take away?
The big idea of the book is this concept of inside out leadership. What we saw these leaders, not just the CEOs, but also, leaders that we've supported over the years, leaders who come through McKinsey, we see ourselves as a leadership factory. These leaders spend a lot of time thinking about their own purpose. Why do they do what they do? What inspires them? What motivates them? What gives them energy? And use that idea to inspire teams and inspire change in the world. Mahatma Gandhi said, be the change you want to see in the world. And that's what we saw these leaders do. I shared a little bit of my own purpose is to bring a smile, bring a sense of possibility, optimism, hope in a world that is full of demoralization. I stand for hope and optimism. I problem solve with leaders on some of their toughest problems. And the book, the Power Forum, McKinsey itself, these are all platforms for me to bring this optimism and a sense of possibility, raise ambition of leaders and support them in their journey as they're trying to accomplish great things. So that's really the big idea that we're trying to bring in this book.
And as you think about that big idea, which is applicable to every manager, every leader, because if you're managing 2 or 3 people, you're a leader and you're on a journey of leadership. But if we think about this in the context of technologists who are starting a company, most of whom they didn't start a company because they wanted to lead people. They started a company because they had an idea that they couldn't get out of their head, and they have a vision for a future that will be different from what it is today. But in order to realize that vision, very quickly they realize that the vast majority of their time is actually spent on leadership.
Right.
Because the people they lead are the ones who are going to help them realize, the vision or the mission that they have set out for. So that transition is a hard one for most founders.
Yeah.
Talk a little bit about sort of what are some of the things people could do early on that journey when you haven't really managed people, you haven't thought about your purpose beyond this, I'm going to take this technology and make it available to the rest of the world.
Yeah, no, it's a great, fascinating challenge. And I think, you already said that the strength that they start with is a vision of the world that doesn't exist today. And that can serve as a great sense of purpose, and that can be a great motivator. That can put them on a mission, and I'm sure we'll talk about, founders as missionaries later on. But that gives them an amazing vision, purpose, a mission that can then motivate them and inspire them each day. And the clearer they are on that vision and what they're trying to see in the future, the more effective they can be in inspiring the teams. The challenge they're likely to face, being a computer science engineer myself and knowing a lot of people in the tech field over the years, they're probably very, very good at coding. They're probably very good in the architecture.
Very analytical.
Very analytical. I think the question is, how do they develop a deeper sense of empathy? Empathy, of course, for leading their team and understanding how they can attract great people that they need to deliver on their vision. We can get into that in more detail. But also empathy for understanding their customers, their clients, the marketplace, and what is changing in the marketplace. If there's one thing we have realized is change is a constant, and there is so much change happening in the world. So they need to be aware of the changes happening in the world and be sensitive, be empathetic to those changes. And that's a key unlock where they will need to invest their time. And the more they're able to understand that, and the more they're able to understand the team, inspire the team, the more they will be successful at executing against their vision.
So you've identified on something which I think is key, both for leadership, but also for actually building a better product, which is this notion of empathy for customers and for the people around you. But it's not a switch you can flip. You can't decide. It's not like a light switch. So for someone who's early in that journey, what advice do you have? And how do they become more empathetic?
Yeah.
And frankly, for people who are further along in their journey too.
We actually have some fantastic stories of people with a tech background and how they've become very empathetic over time. Frank D'Souza of Cognizant is one example. He is in the book. He's actually in the chapter on embedding purpose, actually. He started as a person very, very good at coding, and even now he enjoys coding. Like very late into his career, he would still debug a piece of software and enjoys that. And even his son, as I know, is actually loves coding. So it comes from a set of people and a background deep in the technology space, and yet he realized that to build Cognizant over time, he needed to be able to motivate the front line and and a huge front line, 300,000 people. And so, he had a deep sense of empathy for these people who were like frontline account managers at institutions. And he would tell them like, hey, your goal is to deliver against the needs of the customer and empower them to make the kind of investments that they needed to do and like really keep customer success at the heart of what they did. He would still set very clear goals for these folks, but make it clear that, as you got more senior, you have to deliver against the customer need. You have to be able to attract and develop and motivate people and be very good at what you do and deliver results that you're committing to. So he clear set of goals that he set, but also some very interesting rituals, stories, and legends that he put in place to be able to really inspire people at scale. So he would celebrate the best sales team, on a regular basis, or somebody who took a complaint from a customer and turned that into a win. And so he had rituals where they would actually talk through that, and he had ways by which he made legends of the right kinds of people that people could look up to. And these were not the senior most folks. These were often like people younger in the organization.
On the front lines.
On the front lines. As a way to then make Cognizant known for, driving customer satisfaction, driving growth, and being the best in the industry for a long period of time.
Was it his unique sense of purpose to a business that is, it's hard to inspire 300,000 people?
Frank is one of those individuals who would be very comfortable in India and be comfortable in the US and, be comfortable in Africa where he grew up, like similar to you, so where he spent a bunch of time. So very globally, a true global statesman, an ability to understand different cultures and truly self-aware about his own strengths and areas that he needed to learn and grow. And just the way in which Frank was able to deal with tough challenges with a clear sense of purpose and vision, but also being vulnerable enough to say, I need to come up with new ways of addressing challenges, I think is something that he was just a fantastic learner himself.
Continuing on sort of this topic of leadership, but sort of maybe moving on from Frank, the example, to what are some of the other examples you've seen of other leadership styles that you think young leaders who are early in that journey can learn from?
Yeah, chapter 1 of our book is you're not the smartest person in the room. I think
that's very hard for technical partners.
They may be very good on the technical side, but maybe in terms of understanding the market, what does it take to go to market? Or we talked about what does it take to attract talent, or how do you build a company? So to be a successful founder, again, I'm not that expert in this. I've heard some of your podcasts. There are many, many dimensions, absolutely beyond just the technical strength and the fantastic, software, which, assuming they have a great foundation, there are many elements that they need to build out. They need to just understand that there are many elements that they cannot be expert in every single dimension. And they therefore need to be open to learning from other people, getting outside input, getting ideas, and being able to listen to other folks. Another example is Stéphane Bancel of Moderna. At the time that he had the idea for the vaccine back in 2020, it was in Davos. He got the original idea. He felt they had the technology, and that at some point, they realized that they had the R&D was working, but they still need to figure out how to make this
manufacture it at scale.
And they've never done a single product or a single vaccine. And so, he had a conversation with his head of manufacturing where he said, how can I support you to make 1 billion doses of the vaccine? on the one hand, he was clearly setting an audacious goal, which I'm sure some of these founders do with their team. And at the same time, coming in with the spirit of, how can I support you? So Stéphane, was always willing to roll up his sleeves, solve a problem together with his team, and just acknowledge that they may not have answers to all the problems, and bring all the best ideas to then together solve tough problems. And that's what then helped him launch the vaccine. And then, as they say, rest is history.
Well, that's a remarkable example because, I see this in founders who are early on brilliant, in absolute terms, brilliant, exceptionally talented in the software or the technical insight they may have, or the algorithm around which the company is being built. But very quickly, they're spending 70, 80% of their time on sales, marketing, product definition, things they've never done before. And the balance between, I can solve this problem on a first principles basis because I'm a remarkable problem solver, and I can inspire other people who have done it for a decade or more to help me solve the problem, is a hard one for founders. Like, to what extent do you listen versus say, I'm just going to figure it out on my own? And, the way Stéphane did it for Moderna, sort of the, how can I support you in making 1 billion doses? That's a great story.
No, it's a terrific story. And I think it's on the one hand, not compromising on a bold vision. So I think, and you already touched on it before, right? Yes, you come in with a spirit of humility, which is chapter 1, but that doesn't need to come in the way of setting an audacious goal and co-creating answers with the team. I still think first principles problem solving is important. And then using that in the team, you still need the critical thinking, because by definition, many of these founders are trying to solve problems that
Have not been solved before.
exactly have not been solved before. So that orientation, that mindset, and that capability is quite important. So I don't want to take away from that. And yet, how do you bring, I like the point you were making, to the extent there is actually good knowledge in the space that people have tackled similar problems. Why would you not use that and then build up that foundation?
And one of the things that's hard often for founders in this context is trust.
Yes.
Because especially as you go away from, the further you go away from a technical issue, there are no absolute answers.
Yeah.
And there is no equivalent of a mathematical proof.
Yeah.
So, in an algorithm, very often there is the equivalent of a proof, or there is a way to backtest it. If you're trying to figure out how to set up a sales team, someone can tell you this is why, this is how I think it should be done.
Yeah.
But they can't really tell you why, they can't empirically prove why that is the right answer very often. Like, the data may not exist, the context is different. And that does require a leap of faith.
Yeah.
And that's hard for leaders.
Yeah.
Have you seen examples, of leaders that have sort of, it has to come from inside.
Yeah.
The trust and the empathy has to come from within you.
Yeah.
What are some examples of people who've done that, and how have they gone about it?
Yeah, I think one of the core elements of trust is intimacy. At McKinsey, we have something called the trust equation, where we see trust as a function of credibility, reliability, and intimacy. And what can erode trust is self-orientation. When I am too caught up with my own objectives, that can come in the way of trust. And the area that leaders struggle the most is this concept of intimacy. And in the book, we use the label vulnerability as a proxy, where how do I be clear on the areas where I have data, where I have evidence, where I have conviction, and be clear about that, and be open about the areas where I have question marks and not as sure, and I don't recommend vulnerability in a meaning like going in front of a wide public arena or all my employees to share my deepest, darkest questions, but in the right setting with the right people, with boards or with their leadership team. How do they frame questions for which they may not have the answers?
So, Ramesh, one of the things, we started to talk about was, how does a founder who's relatively early in their journey find purpose? Thoughts on that?
So you're right, Asher. It is actually tough, and it needs conscious time and effort. The way I've seen people do it is to go back and look at some of the crucible moments that have shaped their life. Even at the age of 10, 12, what was their family situation? What happened to them? I shared a little bit of losing my father at the age of 12. That was one of the seminal moments that shaped my life. So asking the question, where did they grow up? Who was in their household? What were moves that shaped their life in the world around them? Those are all great signals and places to start on the purpose journey. I also tell young leaders not to get too caught up, and if they're not that clear, they can start with the vision and the future that they see in the world. That's another way to time it. Yeah. And start by asking the question, what are tasks and practices that motivate them, that inspire them, that can inspire the world, and start with that. It could be as simple as like understanding what their customers are looking for and asking a set of questions in a particular segment, and using that to then start the purpose journey. So you can start the purpose journey from within and crucible moments that have shaped your life, or you can interestingly start from an outer journey of just like asking questions and learning about some topics, and then using that to deepen the inner work.
It's interesting you say that, because most founders are very externally driven when they start, because they have some sense of an idea, a technology, and a vision for how it might change the world. And it might be the whole world, might be a certain part of the world, geographically, or some industry, in the sense that you can start there and over time link that back to an inner purpose. And that journey can happen over many years, because the founders themselves, for most founders, the company they manage is the largest company they've ever managed in their lives. And so that role changes with time. Have you seen CEOs, have you seen examples of CEOs who have really changed dramatically over the course of their journey, and what's motivated them has changed along the way?
Absolutely, Ash. And this process of renewal is constant. And so all the leaders that we've studied and that we've worked with, they're, given the world is changing so fast, by definition, you have to be relevant, to be successful, you need to learn and you need to evolve. You still hold on to, what is your, who you are and what inspires you. So there's an inner core that may be constant, but there are many, many elements that are getting added, that you're learning and that you're evolving and renewing yourself over time. One example we have in the book is Anju Patwardhan, who, started off in the business world and was in the financial services sector, but over time has evolved, has learned more about technology. Now is an investor in Asia, doing quite well, helping companies in the Middle East. She went through her own renewal process. In fact, came to Stanford to spend some time to think about what she wants to do later in her career. So this idea of renewal, I feel, can happen at any point. It can happen in your 20s, in your 30s, in your 50s. And all leaders I see, it's a key aspect of any leadership journey.
As you think about, as you think about common mistakes that people have made along this journey, or lessons that they could, learn from, because very often it's, those are easier to relate to for founders, for all leaders in that matter. Are there examples of common, mistakes people make along this journey?
We have many, many mistakes that we've documented in the book. So hopefully some of your leaders can learn from that. But, one that we touched on is that I feel like I am the smartest person in the room, and not being humble enough to what the market is telling me, what my customers are telling me, or even what my
team is telling me.
I think that's a
clear one. So I'm the smartest person in the room. Clearly an easy mistake.
Easy mistake for founders.
What's the second?
A second one is this notion of fearless learning. And one of the chapters that we have in the book is how do you keep learning all the time? And the leader that we have in that chapter is Admiral Eric Olson. So Eric spent 40 years with the U.S. Navy. He was a U.S. Navy SEAL, and he was in fact the operational commander of the Osama bin Laden operation. But before that, in the Navy SEALs, he had spent a lot of time with, leading operations that were successful and leading operations that haven't worked. And when the U.S. Navy SEALs make mistakes, then, lives can get lost and reputations get affected. And, Eric says that in his own way to say, every time something goes wrong, it's actually a chance to learn and get better. Of course, you want to hold people accountable, and, you owe it to the stakeholders to do that. And at the same time, learn from it so that you can do better each time. So really, this mistake number 2 is, when something goes wrong, how do you make sure you really use that as a learning experience and learn from that to get better?
And is there one other that comes to mind?
I think the other thing that I will talk about is resilience. I think especially in this day and age where the geopolitics, the technology disruptions, climate change, these are all big changes that are happening.
Yeah.
How do I think about becoming more resilient and understand and be comfortable that the world is going to change? I need to change with that and come out of any change as an individual, as an institution, stronger than where I was when the change happened. And one of the key things for that is to have a network of people supporting you. Yeah. I mentioned this to you when we were chatting. I myself have a therapist, have a leadership coach. I have a yoga instructor. I have a couple of members in my advisory board. These are all people who are helping me be effective and me be resilient, despite some of the tough challenges that I've been through in my life.
Those are 3 such relevant lessons for a founder, and I'm going to sort of repeat them just for myself in some sense. For most founders, this notion of I'm the smartest person in the room comes naturally, and as we talked about it a couple of different times over the course of the last hour, that becomes a limitation very quickly, and not 3 years from starting a company, often within the first few months.
Interesting.
The notion of fearless learning is also a really interesting one, because most founders here know all day, every day. And the best founders are absolutely dogmatic. They have to learn to ignore external negative feedback. Anything that creates cognitive dissonance with their vision, they have to learn to ignore. And at the same time, there is a lesson to be learned in everything. So how do you balance your fearless conviction with the willingness to learn from every time you make a mistake, which is probably at least a couple of times a day?
Right.
And so I think that balance of, leaning into the conviction and learning from your mistakes. I mean, we see it every day. When we're having a board meeting yesterday and sort of this issue came up. So it's a daily topic for founders. And I think third is this notion of resilience, because even more than larger companies, founders are on a roller coaster.
Yes.
All day, every day. Most founders have multiple highs and multiple lows in the same day. That's the intensity of that roller coaster. And so the resilience, and at the same time, it takes a decade or more to build a great company.
And how do you test for that? Like, what are markers you look for to see if somebody can really stay the course over a long period of time and be resilient? What are some behaviors or markers you look for?
I think part of it is just, I always think about people as sort of this balance between missionaries and mercenaries. So when we're talking about it, and you need both for resilience.
Yes, you do.
Mercenaries rarely have resilience. They're in it for the quick buck. And you need an element of mercenary behavior, but a lot of this resilience comes from a deep-rooted conviction in the mission.
Yes.
The second thing that I find is resilience is an acquired habit in a sense. Like you convert. I always talk about how you convert iron into steel by heating it and constantly tempering it. Same thing is true for resilience. So you see, has there been resilience in their prior experiences?
Absolutely.
Are there priors that suggest that they have resilience, or have they chosen to walk away when the going got tough? So I think there's some signal in the past. And very often founders are young and the signal is noisy, but I think there is signal. And then lastly, I think for me is I spend a lot of time trying to understand the personal context, your sense of personal, the inside out purpose. Like, why are you doing this?
Right.
What is the context of your family situation? And very often it's just not the right time for you to start a company. And sometimes it is. And so really helping a founder think through what else is going on in their lives and how does that influence how they choose to spend their time over the next handful of years. I think gives you a lot of signal of do they have the resilience to sort of make it through the inevitable ups and downs that are ahead of them.
No, those are fantastic markers.
Sure. And a lot of it just comes from a lot of drinks and a lot of dinners.
And also some mistakes and failures learning.
Lots of mistakes, lots of mistakes. I'm going to switch topics and talk a little bit about, you can't do a podcast these days without talking about AI.
Absolutely.
And so it'd be fun to sort of maybe start by talking about the impact of AI on leadership. What does AI mean for most leaders?
Our belief is that, there's no doubt that technology broadly, AI and then, Gen AI is going to have transformative impact on many industries. Sometimes it may take longer than what people expect, but
often does,
but over time, undoubtedly going to have huge impact. It also comes with huge risks, and society needs to be thoughtful about how we want this technology to evolve and how do we want to use it to have the best impact on ourselves, and how do we build the skills required and the capabilities required. We talked about critical thinking, creativity, judgment, collaboration, communication. All of these are going to continue to be important in leaders. And so the question is, how do you build those capabilities in different domains for leaders to be, on the one hand, be able to use AI for the good of their of society, the company, their own team, themselves, and at the same time evolve themselves as leaders in the new world. That's how I see the interaction between leadership and AI.
And you work with many CEOs of very large Fortune 500 companies who are all dealing with this question for their organizations. And at least our assessment is leadership, AI has a compounding effect on companies. And so in the short term, it feels like you can eke out a couple of percentage points of efficiency, or you can improve a few things here and there. And in the grand scheme of things, if you're a year or two late, it might not matter. Or so it seems. But our sense is the organizations that lean in today to leverage the technology then will compound that effect over a decade. And we'll start to see 30, 40, 50, percentage sort of differences in sort of the performance of folks who adopt AI well versus the others. But again, that's a very tech-centric view of the world. So I'm curious how the CEOs that you work with are thinking about driving AI adoption in their organizations.
So we agree with this view that in the short term, it may seem like the impact is not as high, but in the long term, it will have impact. Most technologies evolve in that way.
Yep.
And it's not a linear process. It's often an exponential process with jumps that happen at specific intervention points. And so we see the same evolution. And I think many companies have lots of pilots and lots of experiments going on. Often they struggle with how do they bring those experiments where there's enough evidence that the technology is working, and really double down and put the investment required behind those. Quite often there's a big change management challenge of building the skills required, the conviction, retooling required so that, they can make this work. And often we see leaders actually, there may be people in the front line or people who just entered the workforce. The newer employees might actually be more comfortable and they know how to use the technology. And where is it that, the more senior folks who have the decision-making ability, how are they really learning? And even myself, I'm a computer science engineer by background. I have now gone back to my roots to learn, what impact AI can have and what does it mean for leadership. So the challenge for leaders is how can they use this as an opportunity to learn and renew themselves and learn from people who may be more early in the workforce.
Now, AI is, most people would agree that AI is going to transform healthcare. So we're already seeing, examples of that when you see some of the things that DeepMind has done around, on the drug discovery or the protein discovery process at one end of the spectrum. And we're also seeing generative AI actually transform the customer interaction, billing, prior auth, a lot of the painful parts of the healthcare value chain have been transformed already in the last couple of years with AI. But I'm sure there's a lot more than those two examples at two ends of the chain. So are there two or three sort of areas of healthcare that you think will be most impacted by AI in the next 3 to 5 years?
Yeah, we definitely see AI having a dramatic impact. And I think if I stay with the life sciences side where you started, it's not just the R&D side. You talked about discovery, but also on the development side with like finding patients and, where is it that you can improve the speed of execution of clinical trials or all the documentation that's required for all the regulatory submissions and many other areas which are important dimensions of the development process.
So for all the founders out there who are looking to build or scale companies at the intersection of AI and healthcare, are there one or two pieces of advice you have for them, given your 30 years of experience?
I mean, two pieces of advice I would have beyond what we talked about from a leadership standpoint, but just within healthcare. I think start with an anchor customer that you can actually experiment with and learn from and have a platform before you go off and build a product and add too many features. Test it early, test it with healthcare is a very complex field, and the interplay of all the different stakeholders to drive outcomes tends to be much harder than what people foresee. So get customer feedback quickly, given the complexity of the system. And the second is really the importance of patient quality, patient outcomes. The regulatory challenges involved in healthcare are so important. So building that expertise early enough into the engine that you're building, so that you don't get caught on the wrong foot later, where you missed a critical dimension of patient safety, quality, or a regulatory aspect that you need to keep in mind.